Let me turn it over to Mike.
Yeah, okay. So I think it was almost exactly a year ago that we added the concept of FQNs, fully qualified names, to jobs, and added the ability for a job to have a parent job. The idea being that, so when a scheduler or workflow orchestrator such as Airflow kicks off a job, you want to kind of qualify that job instance by the scheduler to say that, okay, this job is kicked off by this parent. So you could have maybe a US version of the job and an EU version of the job and South America version of the job or something like along those lines, right? And then so one of the things that we did, so in the original Marquez database schema, there is a uniqueness requirement around job names. And, we wanted to keep that uniqueness requirement, but, it was important for a job to have, right, if the two versions of the job had different parents, they would have different FQNs. And so we changed the uniqueness to constraint to consider both the name of the job and its parent. Now, one of the downsides that we ended up seeing was in some cases in open lineage, the parent information is omitted from the open lineage event. So specifically when jobs fail, they will report open lineage information without the parent facet. And usually this is not a big deal because as long as we get the start event for a job, that does include the facet information or, the parent facet. And so we can define the parent of the job based on that start event. And then when the failure event comes, it has the same run ID. So we know it's the same job. And so we can just kind of say, okay, this failure event belongs to this specific run and has this specific parent. However, in a lot of cases, for various reasons, Airflow and other integrations will only send a failure event. And sometimes the failure happens before the start event actually gets triggered. And so in those cases, we would get a failure event without a parent, and it would try to define a new job. But ultimately, that job still had the same fully qualified name as the job that does have a parent. And so we ended up running into these cases where frequently we would see two jobs that had the same fully qualified name. And then when you try to retrieve that job through the API based on its name, you would throw an exception because there were two jobs coming back rather than a single job. We tried a bunch of different strategies to addressing that on the Marquez side, but unfortunately, right, the issue just kind of kept cropping up. And so basically this fix was to just change the way that constraint was handled, and add specific handling for these cases when we know that we're getting job information that is missing parent facets. And we can update an existing job to include its parent facet information if that parent information comes later on. So the goal is basically just to eliminate that duplication and eliminate those exceptions. So we have that uniqueness constraint again on job names. So I don't know if how many people were running into this issue. I've never seen it come up in the Marquez Slack, but I know here at Astronomer, we saw it happening quite frequently. And again, it would crop up every couple of months or so. So hopefully we've killed this bug once and for all. So that's effectively it.
Cool. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mike?
But I think the only thing I would point out is, Mike, the jobs FQN table is going to go away, right? So
right.
If for any reason someone was querying that table or was leveraging it for something internal, I think it's important to communicate that table eventually will be dropped.
Oh, yes, and good call out, Willie. The table still exists and is actually still being written to, and that is just because, you know, we have a philosophy on making backwards incompatible changes to our database schema. So we will change the code first to stop using a table. And then at a later release, we will actually drop the table. But this way, if we push out a new version of Marquez and for some reason we have to roll back, right? Like there might be a bug in the code or something like that, we can roll back and that table still exists and is still compatible with the older version of Marquez. But so for the time being, the table exists. It is being updated all the time. And so, but it is going to be dropped eventually.